30 minutes starts now. Hey, thanks for tuning in. This is another episode of a recording I'm trying to do on a weekly basis. Some weeks I'm good at getting it out on time, and most weeks I'm not. But I call it a recording. I'm not calling it a podcast, at least until I have a little better production quality, and I feel like I deserve to be on the same shelf as some people who, have like a real nice podcast. But we'll call it a recording. We'll call it a show. Thanks for tuning into my show. I'm going to talk about different things today, but I want to try to tie everything together. I think at the center, what I want to talk about today is going to be a theme of the difficulty of avoiding rants. Going off and just running your mouth, because it's easy to do. It's easy to do that. Today's show is probably going to be the latest show I've released yet, and that's because I've been a little bit busy this week. I mentioned in the last show that I had two job applications that I'd done, and I'd gotten responses, and I was pretty excited about that, even though I hadn't gotten an interview or anything like that. I was making progress, because prior to that I was dropping off or electronically submitting applications and getting nothing, just getting crickets in response. But since the last recording, I had 2 interviews, and I'm happy to say that I have 2 jobs. One's going to be just a one-day only thing. So if you really kind of do the math, I'm rounding up to 2, but it's on average I'm going to have one day job and one day only job. But either way, I count that as a big success. I was already celebrating in the last recording, and all I'd gotten was a response. But now the news is in, and I've been hired, and I'm really, really happy about that. It's been a whole journey. Applying for jobs, and the journey is far from over, because I still have to do a bunch of onboarding paperwork and actually go to work, and there's going to be so much for me to learn. And I think in a roundabout way, this kind of brings me back to something I've kind of wanted to bring up before, and that's I don't talk much, or haven't talked much yet, about life in Japan. I have some thoughts or some opinions about what I want to talk about. It's really, really popular for people to go on social media and talk about living in Japan, to fall into some categories. And I think that it's very obvious why they produce a certain kind of content. What most people tend to do is they tend to make stuff that is very generalized Japan. And I think that no doubt that's because the people who would go searching for that kind of stuff, they are just looking for general Japan. They're not typing in Kyoto or Tokyo or Hokkaido. They're not really searching very specific regions or areas. A lot of people that kind of go looking for that stuff are just typing in Japan. But Japan's a big country. The landmass of Japan is roughly, I think it's roughly equal in square miles, roughly to like California. I think California might be bigger. But it's also spread out a lot more than California is. It's kind of like would match kind of much of the East Coast. But here I go, and I'm given general facts about Japan. Did you know that Japan is, this square miles and this, and you know what? Honestly, this is exactly the kind of stuff that I want to avoid. I don't want to be the guy who's like, hey, let me teach you what sushi is. Hey, did you know the story behind the Japanese flag? Hey, let me just throw fact after fact, like I'm just like a machine that barfs out trivia about the entire nation of Japan. And in fact, that's not what I want to do or have ever wanted to do. And even if people can get away from that kind of facty stuff, a lot of times I feel that the content that a lot of people make about Japan is just very tourist-oriented stuff. And that stuff's a little bit harder for me to avoid, but I do try to avoid it. But anytime, like if me and Yuri were to go to a place on the weekend that was particularly cool and we took pictures, it was like a landmark or some kind of event kind of thing. It starts to be kind of like relevant for tourists, right? If we go up to Fukuoka Tower or we go to this mountain or that place or whatever. When we do kind of touristy stuff, even if we live in the city, even if we're not tourists, if we're just residents, you can still kind of do stuff that feels kind of touristy, right? And that's why it can be a little bit harder to avoid doing that. It's easy to avoid just belching out facts about the country. It's a little harder to not look like a tourist, like, oh, let's take a selfie with this statue or whatever, because you can do that, right? But my point is that I've known for a while that when I talk about Japan, I don't want to fall into those kinds of patterns of treating my hometown like it's just a tourist destination, or trying to look like someone who's on vacation even when I'm not, or trying to be someone who's like the authority, like teaching you about Japan. I would prefer at the moment to not give my opinion on people who choose to do that, who choose to make those channels, because I can definitely see that there's a value and a market for it. But what I am going to say, it's instead of getting into whether that's right or wrong or how I feel about people who choose to do that, what I'd rather get into is I don't want to take that path. The kind of path that I want to take if I'm going to talk about Japan is talk about the city that I'm in and what my experiences are, right? So I want to acknowledge who I am, where I come from, and what it's like for me to live in the city. In particular, what that means for me is, I'm a native English speaker living in a city where there's not a lot of resources for English speakers, particularly if you were to compare my city, Fukuoka, against Tokyo. There's a lot more job opportunities, a lot more business opportunities, just a lot more people in general who will speak English in Tokyo compared to Fukuoka, so that can be a challenge at times. But if I'm going to talk about Japan, if I'm going to talk about, my experiences here, I would rather, it come through, through my eyes, through my experiences, and really capture living here, instead of being kind of like these postcard kind of things or, these throwaway facts and stuff. So that's what I'm doing. I'm talking about, trying to get a job, right? And I'd like to talk about more of that in the future, of course, as I continue through this process of getting a job. Hopefully I can share more of my experiences with you, and it probably would be good for me to kind of go back and talk about how we got here. But I'm going to save that for another time. I'm not gonna dig too deep right now into like job hunting and things like that. But relevant to that, there is something I do want to say, because I did feel a number of times where I wanted to rant, right? Along that process of job hunting, there were a number of times where I kind of tried to reach out to people in the community. And listen, it can be a difficult thing. Anytime you reach out to people you don't really know, you're trying to kind of enter a new community, and try to ask for help all at the same time. It's a really dicey thing, and you're really gambling. You might find someone who is really helpful, and you might find someone who's just really shithead. And in my case, I think I've found both, right? I'm certainly not going to name names or point fingers or let this turn into a rant. But definitely, I've had mixed experiences with people who are supposed to be offering advice. I say supposed to because I really feel like some of the people who offer advice would be just better off just scrolling past. If I go on to a group and say, like, I'm having trouble looking for jobs, or, does anyone know of like a recruiter, that will help place people who speak English and stuff. There's been some people who I just think they've been better off if they just scrolled right on past. But instead I've gotten comments like, learn Japanese. And it's such a it's such a worthless statement. I really like this anime called One Punch Man, and I'm not normally like an anime watcher. If you tell me your favorite anime, I'm willing to bet good money I've never heard of it. Okay, so that kind of tells you what you should know about my knowledge of anime, is that I've probably never heard of your favorite anime. But I do like this show, One Punch Man, and I highly recommend it. It takes a lot of tropes of anime and like turns them on their head, and it's super funny. It's funny in a way that Japanese stuff usually isn't. There's a big difference in comedy between Japanese comedy and American comedy. But it's funny in a way that most anime isn't. It's just so refreshing. And the reason I'm gonna shut up about One Punch Man. The reason I'm bringing it up is there's this episode I just watched a few days ago, and there's a character, not a particularly smart character, and he sees this, or he hears this kid's getting bullied. Right, and I don't remember if the kid told him secondhand or if he observed it, but he's telling this kid, he's like, listen kid, I'm going to give you my advice about how to deal with bullies. And the kid's like, alright, I'm listening. And he's like, you need to get really powerful. If you're really powerful, like, people won't mess with you. And the kid's just like, that's not advice. That's just stating the obvious. And then this guy, he gets this really he gets this look on his face like he's really pleased with himself. He's like, yeah, that advice is so good. It's obvious, isn't it? Like he took that comment like it's obvious as like a compliment that his advice was so good. And I don't know if I'm explaining as well, if it's more funny if you see it, or maybe I'm just crazy. But the example fits so perfectly for people who tell foreigners, you need to learn Japanese. It's like, I don't know any other country where it's more obvious that you need to learn the language to really like perform well and to integrate into the society, right? This is a very I'm looking for my adjectives right now. I'm looking for my words, but this society is very, very homogenous. I think that's the word I'm looking for. Homogenous, right? Where it's like most Japanese people are ethnic Japanese people, and they speak Japanese, and everybody's pretty much doing one thing. And the people who tell foreigners that the Japanese people are homogenous and they speak Japanese and you need to learn Japanese and learn their customs and stuff, the only thing I can say to those people giving that advice is, duh! like, yeah, it's fucking obvious. It's fucking obvious that everyone speaks Japanese and I don't, okay? But before I just learn a whole new language, how about, you give me some help finding a job that I can work today instead of having to be an unemployed student for possibly several years, because usually that's how long it takes a person to become fluent in Japanese. And if you learned it in a year or 6 months or whatever, that's great, but that's probably indicative of a skill or a talent that you have that not everyone has, right? Like, if you see a statistic and says, on average, it takes people like 3 years to learn Japanese fluently, and it took you 6 months, well, think about it, right? Then that means that you're exceptional, and for 3 years to be the average, there's going to be other people who take longer than 3 years, because that's how mathematical averages work. You put together, the outliers of both ends and the people in the middle, you add it all up, and you divide by how many people are. That's how averages work. And if you don't understand that, if you understand Japanese, but you don't understand math, then maybe that's a little more reason why you should try to be understanding with people, because you're good at Japanese and not at math, and I understand math and not Japanese, so everybody's good at something. But telling people that they just need to learn Japanese as advice, it's just such worthless advice, and this is something I really wanted to rant about recently, because I keep running into it. I saw an article posted on Facebook recently, and I wrote like a nice little mini rant in the comments. P.S. Do not read the comments, because they're just full of angry people like me. But yeah, I saw some article written by somebody. They actually paid somebody to write that drivel for some reason. And I've also run into people on like groups, like forums or subreddits. And it's the same, but it's not everybody. Listen, I want to be clear about that. Like, it's just that there will be some individuals. There'll be people who are like, hey, check out this company here, check out this company there. People who are offering real, constructive advice that's useful and helpful, and I appreciate those people. But then there's also people who just have like these worthless suggestions, and it makes me want to rant sometimes, but I didn't. I haven't. I didn't want my first recording where I really talk about Japan to just be a rant, right? And I'm glad that I held it in. However, I don't want to go the other extreme where I never rant, I never say anything bad. That is a part of my personality that I'm trying to change, or let me try to say that another way. I think that I self-censor too much. I understand that sometimes I shouldn't just let fly what's on my mind. Like, sometimes I need to use some discretion. I understand that, but I think that sometimes I use too much discretion, and I scrub and censor my opinions too much, and I can come across too much like a Disney Channel something or other, you know what I mean, like where it's just like, this is perfectly clean. And I don't like that I do that, because I do think that it is necessary to sometimes have ugly things to say, or just very honest things. I've mentioned this going back to my first recording, that I feel that there's a need to do that sometimes, to be human, right? That's why I allow myself to make these recordings that, are low quality, recorded on my phone, no intro music, blah, 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 they're ugly recordings, but I'm allowing myself to do it because I need to be free to be human, right? There's a YouTube video I'm going to link in the description of this by a guy named Louis Rossmann. Louis Rossmann, if you don't know, he's a guy that does phone repair, other electronics repair, computer repair and stuff. And he likes to do kind of like what I'm doing right now, just just ramble for a while. He's got a ton of recordings, and there's one I'm going to link to where he's talking on this same topic about people just always bringing their best self and only their best self to social media. It creates a lot of pressures. It creates a lot of unrealistic expectations, and in some cases it can be just enough to make you want to vomit when you know these people in real life and you know that they're a lot more human than they let on. You know what I mean? Like they're basically like photoshopping not just their faces and their butts, but you know, even like their whole personality is getting the Photoshop treatment, and that's a pretty disgusting thing. So I don't want to go that far. I think that might already have a tendency to do that. I don't think that I embellish things, right? Like, I don't think that I use lies and outright distortions to make myself look good. But I think that it is possible for a person to censor enough things about themselves that only the good things shine through. You know what I mean? Like if I censor myself 98% of the time, then you just get the best 2% that I have to offer. And that, you know, if a person sees that side of me and extrapolates, they're like, wow, you know, he's doing fun things every weekend, or wow, he's got a really great life. I don't know if anyone actually thinks that about me, but if I only show you the best parts of me, you know, it would be reasonable for a person to come away with that, because if they're only seeing the best parts, that's, you know, what else do you have to go on? But in reality, you know, we're all messy, we're all ugly at times, we all get ranty at times, you know, and I've certainly had those motivations lately. Felt like I wanted to rant, but I'm glad that I held it in, that I didn't have like a 30-minute rant about you know, things in Japan that bother me, or you know, people, you know, telling me to learn Japanese, any of the things that I could have, you know, ranted about. I'm glad I did. I'm glad I held it in. I'm also glad though that I could come back. You know, now it's been a few days or a few weeks later, whatever the, you know, topic might be. And I'm glad that I can still reference it and bring it out, but just in kind of a controlled way, because I think that's what, as I kind of grow and try to think about what's the best way to communicate, I don't want to bury the ugly parts of me. I don't want to just blast them out everywhere either. I want to try to like find a way that that there can be a big picture that emerges, you know. So if in the case of you know, a 30-minute recording, if 5 minutes of it is ranting or whatever, that's a fair amount of airtime. You know what I mean? Like a little bit of time to, you know, to let off some steam, but also show like that's not the only thing I'm about, right? So I think it's a question of moderation. I think moderation is a problem for nearly everybody. It's a difficult thing to do. But yeah, you know, finding moderation and you know, letting out those things in the right, controlled way. I think a lot of it is just not doing it impulsively. I think that social media really can play on your impulses, right? I think we should all agree that a lot of times when we're using social media, it's at some really ugly and inopportune times. And I use the word ugly a lot. I think it has a lot of connotations. I think it can work in a lot of different situations. But in this case, what I mean when I say like ugly is, I think a lot of times that you're looking at social media, you wouldn't want to turn a camera on yourself, right? I mean, like, how many people look at social media on the toilet? I'm raising my hand. I don't know if you are, but I mean, I'll be on the toilet and looking at Reddit or looking at Facebook or, you know, whatever. And that's not the only ugly time. You know, there's times where you're riding the train to or from work and you're just so angry. You're either angry thinking about the day you have to go have, or angry thinking about the day you had. There's just so many times where you're not your best self, and that's when you're consuming social media, because you've spent the whole day trying to be your best self, and you're tired from it, and you're unwinding now, and it's during that unwind time that you're looking at social media, and you don't feel like being polite, you don't feel like being nice, and a lot of times you see people, like I was describing a minute ago, in reference to the Louis Rossmann video, people who are just bringing out their best selves, and many times it's bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, many times, we all know it, right? Like, some people will just fabricate a story, or just, exaggerate something. I think we all have the experience of seeing a person on social media that we know in real life, and we know that that's some bullshit, right? And you probably, in the very next scroll, then go on and see some celebrity or some other, content producer that you don't even know, and you might have, carry over those same thoughts, like, oh, that's a bunch of bullshit, I don't believe that, or blah, 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 blah. But the point is that many times when we're consuming social media, we're not in a really good place, right? We'd probably be a lot better to, turn on Netflix or picking up a video game or something, to relax or unwind. Even better still, probably good to go for a run or a bike ride or, build something, build a model, you know what I mean? But, you don't have to start at the top, right? You don't have to start immediately with, the best things you could do, Not everybody who diets has to immediately start, with vegetables. You could start by just cutting out a little sugar or dropping that one snack. Everybody can start somewhere on the road to progress, In the case of social media, it might just be monitoring how much time you spend on it, or it might just be a question of mindfulness. Be aware of your own mindset. Notice that you're having a bad day, or you're in a bad mood, or things are putting you in a bad mood. And this is where it relates back to what I said about being impulsive, is that if you catch yourself scrolling through Facebook, I have to tell you, I know that years ago I used to go on Facebook, and even as I was just opening it up, I hadn't even seen the first post, I knew that I was ready to have an argument with somebody, right? And what I know now that I didn't know then is that kind of self-realization, I hadn't been, how do I say this? I knew that I was ready to start some shit, but I didn't know that I should be thinking about that kind of stuff and acting on those kinds of realizations. If I'm ready to start some shit with some person, I should not be on Facebook right now. And I think that, maybe for some people that might be the place to start, is recognizing when they're in a bad mood and what they're doing about it, and are they doing something that's potentially just more self-destructive? Is this the social version of just comfort eating? You know what I mean? If you break up with somebody and you're just eating an entire gallon of ice cream, you should maybe have some ability to look and go, you know what? I don't know if this was really a good decision. I don't know if I should be drinking away this pain right now, or how, whatever kinds of things that people do to cope, I think it starts with kind of recognizing those behaviors, and I think that there is a social media version of that as well. I think that explains why there are so many toxic comments in places. It's not that people are fundamentally racist or sexist or blah, 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 blah. I think it has to do more with the fact that there's a lot of hurting people on social media, that don't really realize that they should be doing something better with their time. So, I guess, that's what it's about, kind of looking at yourself and looking at your patterns, and are they healthy? So, that's going to be it for today. I will try to get the next show out on time. We'll see how that goes, though. So, that's it for today. Thanks a lot. Bye.